Imagine a morning so bright and clear that it feels like the world itself is holding its breath. The date is November 1st, 1755. It is a Friday, and in the city of Lisbon, Portugal, the air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of the Atlantic Ocean, mixed with the sweet aroma of roasting chestnuts from street vendors. The sun is climbing high, painting the city in a soft, golden light. This is All Saints' Day, one of the most important holidays in the Catholic calendar. For the 250,000 people living here, this isn't just a day off work. It is a day of celebration, of faith, and of family. Lisbon at this moment is the shining jewel of Europe. It is the capital of a vast empire that stretches from Brazil to India, a city of breathtaking wealth and culture. The streets are paved with intricate patterns of white limestone and black basalt stones, shining like mosaics. The buildings are tall and grand, covered in colorful glazed tiles called azuleos that sparkle in the sunlight. Every window is open, catching the breeze, and the sounds of the city are a happy hum of church bells ringing, children laughing, and neighbors greeting one another. Our story focuses on two people who are right in the middle of this beautiful morning. First, there is Manuel. Manuel is 34 years old, a master stonemason with strong, calloused hands and a heart full of pride for his city. He is standing near the Tagus River, watching the water sparkle. He has spent the last 10 years building and repairing Lisbon's great cathedrals, and today he is taking a rare moment of rest. He is wearing his best Sunday coat, a dark blue wool jacket that his sister sewed for him, and he is feeling optimistic. Life is good. The city is booming, and he has a secure future. Across the city, in the Chiado district, we find Sofia. She is Manuel's younger sister, just 22 years old, with dark eyes that shine with curiosity. Sofia is inside the convent of Carmo, a magnificent Gothic church that looks like something out of a fairy tale. The high, pointed arches reach up toward the heavens, and the morning light streams through the stained glass, painting colorful patterns on the floor. Sofia is dressed in a simple but elegant white dress, holding a small candle. She is surrounded by hundreds of other worshippers. The air inside is thick with the smell of incense and beeswax. The choir is singing, their voices rising in a beautiful harmony that makes Sofia feel peaceful and safe. It is now 9:30 in the morning. The city is at its peak. Almost everyone is inside a church. The narrow, winding streets of Lisbon, usually packed with horses and carriages, are strangely quiet. A city is paused, gathered in prayer. Manuel is walking toward the Carmo Convent to meet Sofia after Mass. He whistles a happy tune as he walks, nodding to a few stray cats that are weaving through the empty alleyways. He thinks about the lunch they will share later, perhaps some fresh fish from the market and a loaf of crusty bread. He has no idea that these are the last peaceful minutes the city of Lisbon will ever know. As Manuel steps onto a cobblestone plaza, he notices something strange. It is 9:40 a.m. He stops whistling. The ground beneath his feet doesn't just shake. It feels like it is breathing. It is a subtle movement at first, like a heavy truck rolling by, but there are no trucks here, only horse carts. The water in a nearby fountain ripples, even though the air is still. A flock of pigeons takes flight all at once, screeching in panic, circling the sky in a confused cloud. Manuel looks down at his boots. The small pebbles on the ground start to dance, hopping as if they have a life of their own. Inside the Carmo Convent, the choir has stopped singing. The heavy iron candlesticks on the altar begin to rattle. The sound is a low, deep groan. It seems to come from everywhere at once. Sofia looks up from her prayer. The candle in her hand flickers wildly, even though there is no draft. She looks at the people around her. Their smiles have faded. The priest stops speaking. The silence that falls over the church is heavy and terrified. And then, without warning, the silence is shattered. It is 9:41 a.m. The earthquake strikes. It is not just a shake. It is a violent, heaving convulsion. The ground moves up and down in great, rolling waves, sometimes lifting the buildings 3 feet into the air before dropping them back down. The sound is deafening, like 1,000 thunderstorms crashing at the same time, mixed with the screeching of twisting metal and the splintering of ancient wood. Manuel is thrown to the ground. He lands hard on the cobblestones, scraping his palms. He tries to stand, but the earth is moving too fast. He crawls toward a fountain, grabbing onto the cold stone edge. He looks up and sees a sight that freezes his blood. The buildings around him are swaying like trees in a gale. The facades crack with sounds like gunshots. Chunks of stone, some weighing tons, break off and crash into the streets. He sees the royal palace, the home of the king, just a short distance away. Its towers are wobbling. In seconds, the roof collapses inward, sending up a massive cloud of white dust. Inside the church, Sofia's world turns upside down. The great Gothic arches of the Carmo Convent, which have stood for hundreds of years, begin to twist. The massive stone pillars cannot handle the sideways force. There is a sickening lurch, and the roof starts to come down. The stained glass windows shatter into a million rainbows of shards. People scream, but the sound is swallowed by the roar of the collapsing stone. Sofia throws herself under a heavy wooden bench, curling into a small ball, squeezing her eyes shut and praying with everything she has. The dust fills the air instantly, making it impossible to see. The darkness is absolute. This earthquake is not just a local event. It is a monster. Modern scientists estimate it was a magnitude 9.0. The energy released was so massive that it was felt as far away as Finland and the Caribbean. But here, in Lisbon, it is the center of the nightmare. The shaking lasts for 3.5 minutes. To Manuel, lying on the ground, it feels like an eternity. Every second brings a new crash, a new cry for help. He covers his head with his arms, shielding himself from falling debris. He can hear the river nearby, churning and splashing as the water is thrown out of its bed. Then, as suddenly as it began, the ground stops. At 9:45 a.m., silence returns to Lisbon, but it is a terrible, heavy silence. The air is filled with a thick, gray dust that tastes of chalk and old powder. Manuel slowly lifts his head. He is coughing, his eyes stinging. He looks around and barely recognizes the street where he was standing just 5 minutes ago. The beautiful buildings are gone. In their place are heaps of rubble, piles of wood, and twisted iron. The street level has risen in some places and sunk in others. The pavement is ripped apart, exposing the sewers below. Manuel's first thought is not for his own safety, but for Sofia. He struggles to his feet, his legs trembling uncontrollably. He is covered in white dust, looking like a ghost. He looks in the direction of the Carmo Convent. His heart sinks. The roof of the convent is completely gone. The sky is visible through the broken ribs of the stone walls. It looks like a giant took a bite out of the building. "Sofia," he screams. His voice sounds hoarse and small. He starts to run. The streets are blocked by mountains of stone. He has to climb over piles of debris, scrambling on hands and knees. He sees other people emerging from the dust. They are dazed, bleeding, their faces masks of shock. A woman sits by the side of the road, holding a broken shoe, weeping softly. A man is digging frantically at a pile of rubble with his bare hands, calling out a name. The sense of community from 10 minutes ago has transformed into a shared tragedy. As Manuel runs toward the convent, he sees the true scale of the disaster. The problem isn't just that buildings fell. It's that they fell on the exact day everyone was inside them. The churches, packed with thousands of worshippers celebrating All Saints' Day, have become the deadliest places. The heavy stone roofs, designed to protect the faithful, have crushed them. Manuel passes the church of São João. The front wall has fallen outward into the street, exposing the altar and the pews inside, which are now buried under tons of rock. He finally reaches the Carmo Convent. The scene is devastating. The main chapel is a skeleton of stone. The roof lies in a chaotic pile of massive blocks in the center of the nave. Dust is still floating in the air, swirling in the shafts of sunlight that pierce through the gloom. There is no sound of bells now, no choir, only the groans of the injured and the distant shouts of survivors. "Sofia?" Manuel shouts again, louder this time. "Sofia, where are you?" He starts climbing over the rubble that used to be the wall. His hands are bleeding, his nails torn, but he doesn't feel the pain. He is driven by a single purpose. He finds a spot where a wooden beam has created a small pocket of space beneath the collapsed roof. He gets on his knees and starts digging, pulling away smaller stones and tossing them aside. Can anyone hear me? He yells into the dark gap. For a moment, there is nothing. Then, a faint cough. A small, dusty hand reaches out from the darkness. Manuel grabs it. It is Sofia. She is alive, but she is terrified. Her white dress is gray with dust, and there is a cut on her forehead, but she is breathing. Manuel pulls her out of the hole, and they collapse together on a slab of fallen masonry. They hug each other tightly, the only stable thing in a world that has been broken apart. Sofia is shaking, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. She looks around at the ruin of her church and the city she loves. The walls, she whispers, her voice trembling. They gave up. Manuel holds her close, looking out over the city. From this high point near the convent, they can see all of Lisbon, or what is left of it. The Ribera Palace is destroyed. The Opera House, where the Queen had been planning to attend a concert later that day, is a pile of timber. Fires are starting to break out here and there, lit by the overturned candles and the hearths in the homes that collapsed. Black smoke begins to rise, staining the beautiful blue sky. We have to move, Manuel says gently, helping his sister to stand. We can't stay here. The aftershocks will come. We need to get to the river, to open ground. They join the stream of people stumbling down the hills. Everyone is moving in the same direction away from the crumbling buildings and toward the wide Tagus River. The fear is palpable. People are praying out loud, clutching crucifixes and rosary beads. But even as they pray, Manuel looks at the ground, the stone, the architecture. He is a builder. He knows that stone is strong, but it has limits. He realizes that the earth itself is more powerful than anything men can build. The problem is clear. The city has fallen, and the struggle to survive has only just begun. As they walk, Manuel looks at the time on a clock tower that is miraculously still standing, though cracked. It is just past 10 a.m. In less than 20 minutes, Lisbon has gone from the height of glory to the depths of ruin. The holy day has brought not blessings, but devastation. Manuel tightens his grip on Sofia's hand. He doesn't know what the future holds. He doesn't know about the fire that is about to consume the city or the water that will rise from the sea. He only knows one thing for sure. They are alive, and as long as there is life, there is hope. They walk together, two small figures against a backdrop of smoke and dust, stepping into a new world that is being born out of the ashes of the old. We have to get to the river, Manuel said, his voice raspy from the dust. He tried to sound calm, the way a big brother should, but his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The buildings here are unstable. The open ground by the water is the only safe place. The waves can't hurt us up on the embankment. Sofia nodded, wiping a streak of grime from her forehead. She was still in shock, her eyes wide and unblinking. Is everyone gone? She whispered. Not everyone, Manuel said, squeezing her hand. We aren't, and we won't be. Come on. They joined a slow, stumbling river of people. Thousands of survivors were pouring out of the narrow streets of the Bexa district, all moving with the same desperate instinct. Get away from the falling stone. The scene was heartbreaking. Priests in torn vestments helped elderly women over piles of rubble. Mothers carried children who were too dazed to cry. The smell of crushed limestone and the sharp tang of panicked sweat filled the air. As they walked, Manuel scanned the faces in the crowd, looking for neighbors, for friends. But everyone was coated in the same white-gray dust, making them look like statues come to life. It took them nearly 20 minutes to navigate the ruined streets to the Torrero de Paco the great riverside plaza. When they finally stepped out of the alleyways and saw the Tagus River, a collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the crowd. The water looked vast and flat, a blue-gray sheet stretching out to the ocean. To people who had just watched the solid earth turn into liquid, the water looked stable. It looked like a refuge. Dozens of boats were still moored there, bobbing gently. Some people were already wading into the shallow water, thinking the cool liquid would wash away the dust and the fear. We'll rest by the customs house, Manuel decided, pointing to a grand stone building near the water's edge. Just for a minute. Then we'll figure out what to do. But just as they stepped onto the broad plaza, the mood shifted. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a feeling. A strange, rushing vibration that made the loose pebbles on the ground hop again. People stopped and looked toward the ocean, confused. Then came the sound. It started as a low roar, like an approaching storm, but it grew rapidly into a deafening thunder. The water in the harbor began to behave strangely. The river didn't just ripple, it pulled back. It was as if a giant plug had been pulled at the bottom of the sea. The water retreated rapidly, exposing the riverbed. Ships were left hanging on their sides in the mud. Fish flopped helplessly on the wet sand. Great rocks and ancient shipwrecks, hidden for decades, were suddenly visible. "What is happening?" Sofia cried out, pulling back on Manuel's hand. "Stay back." Manuel shouted, his builder's instinct screaming at him. He grabbed a lamp post to steady himself, pulling Sofia close. "Don't go down there. It's not over." Human nature is curious, and in the chaos, many people didn't run. They stared. Some even rushed toward the exposed sea to pick up lost cargo, or simply to gawk at the impossible sight. But Manuel knew enough about the way the world worked to know that when water leaves that fast, it comes back fast. "Look!" someone screamed in the distance. On the horizon, a white line had appeared. It grew taller with every passing second. It wasn't a wave. It was a mountain of water. The sea was returning, and it was angry. "Run! Run to the high ground!" Manuel roared, grabbing Sofia by the shoulders and turning her away from the water. The crowd erupted into pure panic. The roar was now so loud it drowned out the screams. The wave, estimated to be nearly 40 feet high, came crashing into the harbor with the force of 1,000 armies. It didn't just splash, it smashed. The ships moored in the harbor were snapped like twigs, tossed high into the air, and slammed into the buildings along the waterfront. The great stone customs house, which had looked so sturdy a moment ago, shuddered as the water hammered into its foundation. Manuel and Sofia ran. They didn't look back. The ground beneath their feet was suddenly slick as the water surged over the sea walls, flooding the plaza in seconds. The water was brown and churning, filled with debris furniture, whole trees, chunks of wood, and wagons. It tumbled and rolled, a chaotic soup of destruction. Manuel saw a low wall ahead, part of a garden terrace. "Climb!" he yelled. He boosted Sofia up, her scrabbling feet finding purchase on the stone, and then hauled himself up just as the water surged around their ankles, then their knees. They scrambled higher, gasping for air, and turned to look. The sight was enough to freeze the blood in their veins. The plaza where they had been standing just moments ago was gone. It was a turbulent lake. The water had rushed inland, swallowing streets and squares, carrying people away. The great marble horse statue in the center of the plaza was swallowed up to the horse's neck. The power of the ocean was absolute. It cared nothing for stone, for wood, or for human plans. The water held its ground for a few agonizing minutes, swirling and eddying, trapping those who hadn't escaped. Then, just as violently as it had arrived, the gravity of the earth pulled it back. The water rushed out toward the sea again, dragging everything it had captured: ships, wagons, and people back into the deep, dark Atlantic. A second wave followed, smaller but still deadly, and then a third, ensuring that nothing left standing on the waterfront would remain safe. "We have to go higher," Manuel said, his voice shaking. He looked at Sofia. She was crying silently, her face pale as a sheet. "The water won't reach the top of the hill. We need to get to the Quillado district." Away from the river, they turned their backs on the destroyed waterfront and began to climb the cobbled streets that led up away from the river. But as they reached the top of the hill, around 11 a.m., they realized that escaping the earthquake and the tsunami was not enough. A new enemy was waiting for them. The morning of November 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day, Lisbon, one of the world's richest cities, was bathed in the warm autumn light. Church bells pealed, their joyous chimes calling the faithful to Mass. In the bustling streets, merchants hawked their wares, children played, and life unfolded with the comfortable rhythm of a prosperous capital. I was Manuel, a young architect, filled with dreams of building grand monuments for my beloved city. Next to me, holding my hand, was Sofia, her eyes sparkling with the same love for Lisbon that filled my own heart. We were walking towards the magnificent Carmo Convent, ready to offer our prayers. blissfully unaware that our world, our city, our very lives were about to be shattered. It started without warning, not as a distant rumble, but as a violent, guttural roar from the very bowels of the earth. The ground beneath our feet bucked and heaved like a furious beast. The cobblestones split open, and the grand stone facades of the buildings around us began to sway, groaning under the immense strain. People screamed, a symphony of terror that was almost drowned out by the thunderous crash of collapsing masonry. I grabbed Sofia, pulling her tight against me as the air filled with a choking white dust. The world turned into a chaotic blur of falling stone, splintering wood, and human panic. The tremor lasted for minutes, an eternity of pure, primal fear. When the shaking finally subsided, a terrifying silence fell, broken only by the whimpers of the injured and the distant, ominous cracking of structures about to give way. We pushed ourselves up from the rubble, coughing, our fine church clothes now torn and covered in grime. What we saw was a vision from hell. Lisbon was no longer a city. It was a jagged, broken wound. The spires that had once pierced the sky were now heaps of stone. The familiar streets were impassable canyons of debris. And then a new horror emerged. From the shattered heart of the city, small tendrils of smoke began to rise. The countless candles lit for the holiday mass, toppled by the quake, had become thousands of tiny, malevolent sparks. They found purchase in splintered beams, tapestries, and the wooden frameworks of the once proud buildings. The small fires began to merge, feeding on each other, growing into an insatiable monster of flame. A hot wind, born of the fire itself, began to blow through the ruins, fanning the embers into a roaring inferno. A wall of fire, several stories high, was consuming entire districts, moving with a speed that seemed impossible. The air grew thick and scorching, making every breath a painful effort. Panic seized the crowds of survivors. They ran blindly, trampling one another in a desperate stampede away from the flames. But there was nowhere to run. The narrow medieval streets that had once been Lisbon's charm had become deadly traps, funneling the heat and smoke, turning alleyways into ovens. I saw the terror in Sofia's eyes and knew we couldn't just run. We had to think. We had to fight. I scanned our surroundings, my architect's mind racing, trying to see patterns in the chaos. Most buildings were made of wood and stone, perfect fuel for the fire. But if we could create a gap, a space where the fire had nothing to consume, we might be able to survive its passage. Sofia, we need to make a fire break. I yelled over the deafening roar. I pointed to a street that was already half choked with rubble, but was wider than the others. We have to clear a path. Tear down anything that can burn. It was a desperate, insane idea. How could two people stop a conflagration that was devouring a city? But in her eyes, I saw not doubt, but a flicker of grim determination. She nodded, and we went to work. We weren't alone for long. Others, seeing the logic in our madness, joined us. Men, women, even children, their faces smeared with soot and tears, began to tear at the wreckage with their bare hands. We were a frantic colony of ants, throwing flammable debris-broken furniture, tattered curtains, wooden beams back into the path of the approaching fire, hoping to widen the gap. It was brutal, exhausting work. The heat was immense, blistering our skin. The smoke was a constant, suffocating presence. My lungs felt like they were on fire, and my hands were raw and bleeding. Every muscle screamed in protest. But we couldn't stop. We could hear the fire coming, a monstrous, crackling beast that devoured everything in its path. The wall of flame reached our street. The heat was a physical blow, so intense it felt like it was melting our very flesh. The roar was all-encompassing, a sound of pure destruction. We huddled on the far side of our makeshift firebreak, shielding our faces, the space we had cleared seeming pitifully small. Sparks and embers rained down on us like a demonic snowfall. A wooden cart we had failed to move burst into flames with an explosive whoosh. For a moment, I was sure it was over, that the fire would simply leap across our gap and consume us. I held Sofia, whispering that I loved her, preparing for the end. But then, a miracle. The main body of the fire, starved of fuel, swirled and raged but did not cross. It flowed around our small island of survival, like a river diverted by a dam. We watched, awestruck and trembling, as the inferno passed. The sky glowed a violent, apocalyptic orange. The sounds of destruction continued, but they were now behind us. We had survived the firestorm. Cautiously, we moved through the smoldering ruins. The city was unrecognizable, a landscape of black skeletons and glowing embers. The air was still thick with the smell of smoke and death. We stumbled upon a courtyard, enclosed by the burnt-out shells of what were once grand houses. The stone had withstood the worst of the fire, and inside it was a small pocket of relative safety. We collapsed onto the scorched ground, utterly spent, our bodies aching, our minds numb. As we lay there, huddled together for warmth and comfort, the sun began to set. But it wasn't the beautiful, gentle sunset we knew. The smoke and dust in the atmosphere turned the sky into a canvas of bruised purples and blood reds. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the hellscape that was once Lisbon. It was a terrifyingly beautiful, surreal sight. All around us, the city smoldered. The great Carmo Convent, where we were headed that morning, was now a roofless ruin, its Gothic arches stark against the fiery sky. We were alive, but our world was gone. Sofia was crying softly, her tears tracing clean paths through the grime on her face. I held her close, feeling the deep, shuddering tremors of her grief. Looking out over the ruins of my home, a deep sadness washed over me. But beneath the grief, something else was stirring. A stubborn, defiant resolve. Lisbon was broken, but it was not dead. Its people, those of us who had survived, were still here. We had faced the wrath of the earth and the fury of the fire, and we were still breathing. I looked at Sofia, her face illuminated by the dying light and the glow of 1,000 embers. I saw our future not in the ashes, but in what would rise from them. "We will rebuild," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "We will build it better, stronger. A city not of vanity, but of resilience. A city that can withstand the anger of the earth. This is not the end, Sofia. This is a new beginning." And as darkness finally fell over the ruins of Lisbon, I knew that my dream was no longer to build monuments, but to rebuild a home. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like and subscribe for more journeys into history. November 1st, 1755. All Saints' Day. The grand churches of Lisbon are overflowing with the faithful, their spires reaching towards a clear autumn sky. It's a morning of peace, a morning of prayer. And then the world ends. The ground doesn't just shake. It roars, it heaves, it tears itself apart. Stone archways collapse, magnificent buildings crumble into dust, and the very foundations of the city give way. For 6 terrifying minutes, the earth wages war on one of Europe's wealthiest and most beautiful capitals. In the Baixa district, the heart of the city, a young builder named Manuel and his wife Sofia scramble from the ruins of their home. Dust chokes the air, thick and gray, turning day into a premature twilight. The screams of the injured and the dying echo through the rubble-strewn streets. This isn't their Lisbon anymore. It's a graveyard. But the horror is far from over. As survivors stumble towards the waterfront, seeking open space, they see the Tagus River pull back, exposing the riverbed in a way no one has ever seen. Then, it returns with unimaginable fury. A tsunami, a wall of water, crashes into the shore, swallowing thousands more souls and dragging the debris of the city back out to sea. And as if that weren't enough, the fires begin. The thousands of candles lit for the All Saints' Day festival, now toppled among splintered wood and dry tapestries, ignite a firestorm. For 5 days and 5 nights, flames rage through what's left of Lisbon, consuming everything the earthquake and tsunami spared. The city of light becomes a city of fire and ash. When the smoke finally begins to clear, the scale of the devastation is apocalyptic. 85% of Lisbon's buildings are gone. Tens of thousands are dead. The great libraries, the priceless art, the royal palace, all reduced to smoldering ruins. Europe is in shock. How could God allow this to happen to such a devout city on such a holy day? The disaster sparks a philosophical crisis that echoes across the continent, with thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau questioning the very nature of divine providence. But amidst the despair, one man sees not an end, but a beginning. Sebastião de Mello, better known to history as the Marquis of Pombal, the king's prime minister, arrives on the scene. He is a man of the Enlightenment, pragmatic, decisive, and ruthless. As chaos reigns and people flee, Pombal stands firm. When asked what is to be done, his orders are swift and brutally practical. Bury the dead and feed the living. There is no time for lengthy funerals or elaborate grieving. Under his command, mass graves are dug to prevent the spread of disease. He seizes food supplies from the surrounding countryside to prevent famine and deploys the army to prevent looting, setting up gallows throughout the city as a stark warning to anyone who would prey on the weak. Pombal understands that before you can rebuild a city, you must first restore order. But Pombal's vision goes far beyond mere recovery. He sees an opportunity. This catastrophe, this clean slate, is a chance to build a new Lisbon, a city not of the past, but of the future. He doesn't just want to repair, he wants to reinvent. And for that, he needs data. He needs to understand what happened. In a move that marks the birth of modern seismology, Pombal dispatches a detailed questionnaire to every parish in the country. How long did the tremor last? What direction did it come from? Did the water in wells rise or fall? How many buildings were destroyed? Builders like our Manuel, who survived the initial quake, are now invaluable sources of information. He recounts how the ground seemed to roll like waves, how older, more rigid buildings shattered, while more flexible wooden structures swayed but held. His practical, on-the-ground observations, along with thousands of other responses, are collected and analyzed. For the first time in history, a natural disaster is studied not as an act of God, but as a scientific phenomenon. Armed with this new knowledge, the rebuilding begins. Pombal rejects the idea of recreating the old city with its narrow medieval streets. Instead, he commissions a revolutionary new plan, a perfect grid of wide, airy avenues and uniform, elegant buildings. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about safety. Wide streets would serve as fire breaks and allow for quick evacuation, and the buildings themselves would be a marvel of engineering. Manuel finds himself at the forefront of this new construction. He and his fellow builders are trained to construct what becomes known as the Pombaline cage. It's an internal wooden lattice, a flexible skeleton designed to be integrated within the stone walls of the new buildings. The idea is simple, but brilliant. If another earthquake strikes, the frame will sway and absorb the shock, dissipating the energy and preventing a catastrophic collapse. It's one of the world's first examples of earthquake-resistant construction. So block by block, a new city rises from the ashes. Manuel, who once saw his world destroyed, is now building a safer one. The Baixa district, once a scene of total annihilation, transforms into a symbol of resilience and modernity. The uniform facades, the grand squares, the logical layout, it's a city built on reason, order, and the hard-won lessons of disaster. The 1755 Lisbon earthquake was a tragedy of immense proportions, a moment that shook the foundations of Western thought. But it also became a powerful testament to human ingenuity and the will to survive. The response, led by the iron will of the Marquis of Pombal, didn't just rebuild a city, it forged a new one. It gave birth to seismology, pioneered anti-seismic architecture, and laid the groundwork for modern urban planning. Today, when you walk through the beautiful streets of downtown Lisbon, you're walking through a monument. A monument not to what was lost, but to what was learned. It's a city that looked into the abyss and chose to build its way back, stronger, smarter, and more resilient than ever before. Thanks for watching. If you found this story of destruction and rebirth as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the pivotal moments that shaped our world. See you next time. In the past, buildings were made of solid stone walls. If the earth shook, the stone cracked and the building collapsed. The new design was different. Inside the walls, they built a three-dimensional wooden lattice, a cage made of interlocking trees. It looked like the skeleton of the building. Manuel explained it to the other workers as they placed the heavy oak beams. "Think of it like a willow tree in the wind," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "A rigid oak snaps in a storm, but a willow bends. This wood cage is flexible. When the earth shakes, the building will sway and dance with the tremors. It won't fight the earthquake. It will ride it." They also invented a first version of shock absorbers. At the base of the walls, They placed layers of pine logs horizontally in the trenches. These acted like suspension, absorbing the energy of the ground before it could hit the building above. Manuel hammered the beams into place, feeling the strength of the design. It was smart. It was engineering used for the safety of the people. Sofia was also part of the rebirth. With the convents in ruins, she started teaching the neighborhood children. She held classes in the open air, sitting on a wooden bench while the sounds of construction hammers played a rhythmic background music. She taught them to read and write, but she also taught them about the earth. She told them that nature was powerful, but human ingenuity was powerful too. As the months turned into years, a new Lisbon began to rise from the ashes. It was faster than anyone thought possible. Within a year, thousands of people had homes. The buildings looked elegant and uniform, with clean facades and balconies that added a touch of beauty to the structured design. The Baixa Pambalina became the pride of the city. One evening, about 2 years after the disaster, Manuel and Sofia walked through the newly finished Rua Augusta. It was a wide, beautiful street lined with arches. The smell of ash was gone, replaced by the smell of fresh paint, roasting coffee, and the salt air coming from the river, which was now peaceful again. People were out walking, laughing, and shopping. The cafes were full. Manuel stopped in front of a building he had helped construct. He placed his hand on the smooth stone wall. He felt the solidity of it, but he knew the secret flexibility inside. He looked at his sister. "We did it," he said softly. "We brought the city back. But it's different now, isn't it?" Sofia replied, looking up at the sky. "It's not just about faith anymore. It's about thinking, about understanding." Manuel nodded. The lesson of November 1st, 1755 was a hard one, but it was a gift to the world. The disaster in Lisbon taught the world that you cannot stop the forces of nature. You cannot stop the rain, the wind, or the shaking of the ground. But you can prepare for them. You can use your mind to protect your body. The tragedy proved that science, engineering, and clear thinking are just as important as prayer. The earthquake had destroyed a city, but it had created a new way of thinking. It proved that when communities come together, when they share knowledge and work for the common good, they can overcome anything. The resilience of the people of Lisbon became a beacon of hope for the entire world. As the sun set over the Tagus River, painting the water in shades of pink and gold, Manuel and Sofia walked toward the riverbank. The water lapped gently against the new stone seawalls. It was peaceful. The nightmare was over. What remained was a testament to the human spirit, a city that had refused to die, a people who had refused to give up, and a lesson that would keep generations safe for centuries to come. Life, they realized, isn't about avoiding the fall. It's about how beautifully and cleverly you pick yourself back up.